The moment Marlowe Winters heard the distant rumble above her on the mountain pass, she knew death was coming down fast. The February morning of 1885 had started clear and cold in Superior, Arizona, an unlikely place for snow. But the mountains surrounding the copper mining town rose high enough to catch winter's fury, and this storm had dumped 3 feet in 2 days. She had been riding to deliver medicine to the mining camp higher up when the world turned white and loud, tons of snow breaking loose from the cliff face above, swallowing her and her horse in a roaring avalanche that tore them apart and buried everything in its path. Marlowe had made the mistake of taking the mountain route instead of waiting for the storm to fully pass. Her father lay sick with pneumonia back in Superior, and the camp foreman's wife was in labor with complications. She was the closest thing to a doctor the rough mining community had, trained by her physician uncle in Denver before coming west 3 years ago at 20 years old. Now 23, she had seen enough frontier hardship to know when to take risks and when to wait, but today her judgment had failed her. The medicine in her saddlebags could save lives. That thought had pushed her forward into the pass even as the wind picked up and the snow clouds gathered dark and heavy overhead. The crushing weight of the snow had knocked the breath from her lungs. She remembered the sensation of tumbling, of the white cold engulfing her, of her body being tossed like a rag doll, and then the sudden stop that slammed her against something solid. For a moment, there was only darkness and the pressure of thousands of pounds of snow pressing down on every inch of her body. She could not move her arms or legs. Her chest felt compressed in a vice. Panic clawed at her throat as she realized she was buried alive, entombed in an icy grave somewhere beneath the snowslide. She forced herself to breathe slowly through her nose, conserving the small pocket of air that had formed near her face. She could feel the warmth of her own breath creating a tiny space, melting the snow just inches from her mouth. Her medical training kicked in, overriding the terror. She had perhaps 30 minutes of air, maybe less. Her body temperature would drop rapidly. Hypothermia would set in. She had treated enough frostbite victims to know exactly how she would die if no one found her. No one knew she had taken this route. Her father was delirious with fever. The townspeople thought she had stayed home to nurse him. The mining camp was not expecting her specifically, just hoping someone would come. She was alone on this mountain, and the chances of anyone finding her before she suffocated or froze were nearly impossible. Still, Marlowe Winters was not the type to surrender easily. She wiggled her fingers, testing for any movement. Her right hand had some space, trapped against what felt like a fallen tree branch. She worked her fingers slowly, packing the snow around them, creating the smallest bit of room. It was exhausting work, and she had to rest every few seconds, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The cold was seeping through her wool coat and leather gloves, through her riding dress and boots, settling into her bones with cruel efficiency. Time became meaningless in the darkness. She might have been buried for 10 minutes or an hour. The air in her small pocket was growing stale and thin. Her fingers had gone numb despite her efforts to keep moving them. She thought of her father, wondered if he would recover only to learn his daughter had died on a foolish errand. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, and wondered if she would see her soon. The thought brought tears that froze on her cheeks. Then, impossibly, she heard something. A distant sound muffled by the snow, scraping, digging. It could have been her oxygen-starved brain playing tricks, creating hope where none existed. But the sound continued, grew closer. Someone was above her, moving snow. Marlowe tried to scream, but she barely had enough air to whisper. She focused on staying conscious, on keeping her breathing steady, on holding on to life for just a few minutes longer. Ethan Quade had been tracking the mountain lion for 2 days when the avalanche hit. The big cat had been taking livestock from the ranches outside Superior, and the ranchers had pooled money for someone to deal with the problem. At 26, Ethan had a reputation as the best tracker and hunter in the territory, a cowboy who could read sign like other men read newspapers, who could survive in country that would kill softer men. He had grown up in these mountains, learning from Apache scouts and old mountain men, and he knew every pass and canyon for 50 miles. He had been above the slide path, tracking the lion's prints in the fresh snow, when he heard the roar and saw the mountainside give way. From his vantage point, he watched the massive river of snow cascade down the slope, saw the tiny figure of a horse and rider get swept away and disappear. His heart had lurched in his chest. Someone was buried down there, buried alive, and he was the only person who knew it. Ethan did not hesitate. He urged his horse down the mountain at a reckless pace, sliding and jumping through drifts, taking risks that could have killed them both. His bay gelding was sure-footed and brave, trusting his rider's judgment even when the terrain looked impossible. They reached the debris field within 20 minutes, and Ethan dismounted at a run, his eyes scanning the churned-up snow for any sign of where the rider might be. The avalanche had spread across 100 yards, piled 10 feet deep in places. Finding someone in that chaos would be like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was trying to kill the needle, and time was running out fast. Ethan knew the victim had perhaps 30 minutes of air, maybe already less. He had to think smart, not just dig random. He studied the slide path, marking in his mind where he had seen the rider disappear. He looked for disturbed snow, for anything that might indicate where a body had come to rest. There, about 40 feet from where he stood, he saw a torn piece of fabric caught on a rock, a scrap of dark blue wool. He ran to it, dropped to his knees, and began digging with his gloved hands, scooping away the heavy snow as fast as his arms could move. The work was brutal. Each handful of snow had to be moved, and more snow kept sliding down to fill the hole he was creating. His shoulders burned with effort, his breath coming in great clouding gasps in the thin mountain air. He dug down 3 feet and found nothing. Doubt crept in. What if he was digging in the wrong place? What if the fabric had been ripped off early in the slide and carried here while the rider was somewhere else entirely? He forced the doubt away and kept digging. His hands hit something solid, a tree branch caught in the slide. He pulled it free and his heart leaped. Beneath it, he saw leather. A glove, a hand. He dug faster, clearing snow from around the arm, following it to a shoulder ahead. The woman's face was gray-white, her lips blue, her eyes closed. For a terrible moment, Ethan thought he was too late, that he had dug up a corpse. Then her eyelids fluttered. Her chest moved with a tiny, struggling breath. She was alive, barely and fading fast. Ethan dug with renewed desperation, clearing snow from around her body, trying to free her without causing more injury. She had been slammed against the tree, and he had no idea what bones might be broken, what internal damage she might have suffered. But he had no choice. Leaving her here meant certain death. Moving her might kill her, but it was the only chance she had. He got his arms under her shoulders and knees, lifting her free from the snow with a grunt of effort. She was a dead weight, unconscious now, her body limp and cold. He carried her to where his horse stood waiting and laid her across the saddle, then mounted behind her, holding her against his chest as he turned the horse back toward Superior. The ride down the mountain was a nightmare, trying to keep her secure while navigating treacherous terrain at speed. He could feel how cold she was through their clothes, her body temperature dangerously low. He talked to her the whole way down, his voice rough with effort and fear. "Stay with me now. You are going to be all right, just keep breathing. We will get you warm, stay with me." He did not know if she could hear him, but he needed to say the words, needed to will her back to life with the force of his voice. Superior came into view below them, the small mining town tucked into the canyon. Smoke rising from chimneys, the afternoon sun glinting off the snow-covered roofs. Ethan rode straight down the main street, shouting for help, and people came running from the buildings. An older man with a gray beard reached up to help Ethan lower the woman down. "It is Marlowe Winters," someone said, and there were gasps and exclamations. People knew her, cared about her. That was good. That meant she mattered here, had roots, had reasons to fight for life. "Where can we take her?" Ethan asked. "She needs warmth and medical attention now." "The hotel," the bearded man said. "I am Samuel Chen, I run it. Bring her inside, we will send for her father." "Her father is sick," a woman said. "Pneumonia." Marlowe was trying to get medicine to the camp when this happened. Ethan carried Marlowe into the hotel, following Samuel up the stairs to a room where a fire already burned in the hearth. They laid her on the bed, and Samuel brought blankets while his wife brought hot water bottles. Ethan pulled off Marlowe's wet coat and boots, his movements efficient and impersonal, despite the intimacy of the task. He had treated hypothermia before, knew that warming her too fast could kill her as surely as leaving her cold. It had to be gradual, careful. Her eyes opened, just for a moment, and she looked directly at him. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came out. Then her eyes closed again, and she went still. "Is she?" Samuel's wife whispered, her hand going to her mouth. Ethan pressed his fingers to Marlowe's throat, feeling for a pulse. It was there, thin and thready, but there. "She is alive, but we need to keep her that way." "Someone who knows medicine. Is there anyone?" "She is the one who knows medicine," Samuel said grimly. "The closest real doctor is in Globe, 2 days' ride in good weather. The passes will be closed for a week after this storm." Ethan looked down at the woman on the bed, at her pale face and blue-tinged lips, and made a decision. "Then we do what we can. I have treated cold injuries before. We need to warm her slowly, keep her dry, watch for frostbite. Does anyone know if she was injured in the slide besides the cold?" They examined her carefully, feeling for broken bones, finding bruises and scrapes, but nothing obviously broken. She had been incredibly lucky, cushioned by the snow and stopped by the tree before worse harm could come to her. The hypothermia was the main danger now, and the possibility of pneumonia if fluid had gotten into her lungs. Ethan stayed by her bedside as the afternoon faded to evening. Samuel's wife brought him food and coffee, which he accepted gratefully. Other townspeople came by to check on Marlowe, to offer help, to tell Ethan he was a hero for saving her. He brushed off the praise. He had simply done what anyone would do. But as the night deepened, and he sat in the chair by her bed, watching her breathe, watching color slowly return to her face as her body temperature came up, he found himself studying her features with more than medical concern. She had a strong face, handsome rather than pretty, with high cheekbones and a determined chin. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, still damp from melted snow. There was something about her, even unconscious, that spoke of competence and courage. A woman who rode into mountains in a storm to deliver medicine was not a woman who lived a safe, small life. Near midnight, she stirred and her eyes opened, clear and aware this time. She looked around the room, confused, then her gaze settled on Ethan. "You found me," she whispered, her voice hoarse and rough. "I did," he said, leaning forward. "How are you feeling? Cold, sore, alive?" She tried to smile, but it turned into a cough that made her wince. "My horse. I am sorry. I did not see the horse, the avalanche." He left the rest unsaid. Tears welled in her eyes. Belle, she was a good mare. She did not deserve that. She was quiet for a moment, then looked at him again. "You dug me out. You saved my life. I happened to be nearby, tracking a lion. Right place, right time." "No," she said firmly, though the effort of speaking clearly exhausted her. "You saw the slide and you came down to look. You could have assumed I was dead. You could have decided it was not your concern, but you came and you dug until you found me. That was not luck. That was choice." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Some wall he had not known was there developing a crack. "Well, I am glad I made that choice. The world would be poorer without you in it, Miss Winters." "Marlowe," she corrected. "I think you have earned the right to my first name, Mr. Quade." "Ethan Quade. Ethan." She tested the name, and he liked the way it sounded in her rough whisper. "Thank you, Ethan. I owe you my life." "You owe me nothing," he said. "Just focus on getting well." She nodded, her eyes already drifting closed again. "The medicine," she murmured. "I had medicine for the camp. It is probably lost in the snow." "The camp can wait," Ethan said quietly. "Sleep now." But Marlowe was already asleep, her breathing deep and even, her body finally warm enough to rest properly. Ethan watched her for a long moment, then settled back in his chair, intending to stay just another hour to make sure she remained stable. He woke at dawn to find he had slept sitting up, and Marlowe was awake, watching him with eyes the color of amber in the morning light. "You stayed all night," she said. It was not a question. "Someone needed to keep an eye on you," he replied, stretching to work the kinks from his neck and back. "How do you feel?" "Like I was buried in an avalanche," she said with a wry smile, "but better than I have any right to feel." "I should be dead, Ethan. But you are not." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at Superior waking up below. "That is what matters." Marlowe pushed herself up to sitting, wincing at the effort. "I need to check on my father. He has pneumonia. I need to see if he made it through the night." "You need to rest," Ethan said firmly, turning back to her. "You nearly died yesterday. Your body needs time to recover." "I am a healer," she said, her jaw setting in a stubborn line. "I do not have the luxury of rest when people need me." "Even healers need healing sometimes." They stared at each other, and Ethan saw the same stubbornness in her that he recognized in himself. This was a woman who did not back down easily, who pushed herself beyond reasonable limits, who put others first even at cost to herself. He understood that. He had spent his life the same way, living on the edge, taking the jobs no one else wanted, helping people who could not help themselves. "At least eat something before you try to get up," he said, compromising. "And let me help you. You will fall flat on your face if you try to walk on your own right now." Marlowe considered this, then nodded. "All right. That is fair." Samuel's wife brought breakfast, and Marlowe ate with good appetite despite her ordeal, which Ethan took as a positive sign. She was strong, resilient, healing fast. When she insisted on getting dressed and going to check on her father, Ethan helped her down the stairs, supporting her weight when her legs shook with weakness. Her father's house was a small frame building on the edge of town, tidy despite the illness within. Marlowe's face was tight with worry as she opened the door and stepped inside. The main room was cold, the fire burned down to coals. She moved quickly to the bedroom, and Ethan heard her gasp. He followed her in and saw an older man in the bed, gray-haired and thin, but breathing steadily, his color better than Ethan would have expected for someone with pneumonia. Marlowe had her hand on his forehead, checking for fever. "It broke," she whispered. "The fever broke." "Oh, thank God it broke." Her father's eyes opened, bleary but aware. "Marlowe, what are you doing up? You should be in bed. The storm." "I am fine, Papa," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I am fine and you are going to be fine. The fever broke." "You look terrible," her father said, which made Marlowe laugh through her tears. His eyes shifted to Ethan standing in the doorway. "Who is this?" "This is Ethan Quade. He saved my life yesterday. I was caught in an avalanche on the mountain pass and he dug me out." Her father's face went pale. "You were in an avalanche. Marlowe, what were you thinking going up there in that storm?" "I was thinking the mining camp needed medicine, and you were too sick to stop me," she said gently. "It was a foolish risk, and I am sorry I worried you. But I am here, and I am all right, and you are getting better. That is all that matters now." Ethan helped Marlowe rebuild the fire and get her father comfortable with water and broth. The old man, Thomas Winters, dozed off again, and Marlowe finally allowed Ethan to take her back to the hotel. She was swaying with exhaustion by the time they reached her room. "You are a stubborn woman," Ethan said as he helped her back into bed. "So I have been told," Marlowe replied. "But I notice you are still here, helping a stubborn woman who is not even related to you. What does that make you?" "A fool, probably," he said, but he was smiling. "Or maybe just someone who likes stubborn women." The words hung in the air between them, more significant than either had intended. Marlowe looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the trail-worn cowboy exterior to the man beneath. He had kind eyes, she thought. Gray-blue like storm clouds, but kind, and strong hands, scarred from work but gentle when they needed to be. He had dug for her in the snow. He had carried her down the mountain. He had stayed with her through the night. Those were not the actions of a man who did not care. "Why did you come down to look?" she asked quietly. "When you saw the avalanche, you could have assumed no one survived. Why did you come?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "My younger sister died when I was 18, he finally said. "Thrown from a horse, broke her neck. I found her, but I was too late. There was nothing I could do. Ever since then, when I see someone in trouble, I cannot walk away. I have to try. Even if the odds are impossible, even if it seems hopeless, I have to try. Because maybe this time I will not be too late." Marlowe felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I am sorry about your sister, but I am grateful that her loss taught you to try. Because you were not too late for me, Ethan. You were exactly on time." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "You need rest. I should go. I still have a mountain lion to track, and the ranchers are waiting." "Will you come back?" Marlowe asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice that had not been there before. "To check on me, I mean. Just to make sure I am healing properly." "I will come back," Ethan promised. "Rest now." He left before he could say anything else, before he could act on the sudden urge to brush the hair back from her forehead, to tell her that he had not stopped thinking about her since he pulled her from the snow. This was ridiculous. He barely knew her. She had been conscious for a total of maybe an hour in his presence. And yet, something had happened on that mountain yesterday, something that went beyond rescuer and rescued. When he looked at her, he saw someone he wanted to know better, someone he wanted to protect and stand beside, someone who made him think about a future that involved more than drifting from job to job alone. Ethan spent the next week in the mountains, finally tracking down and dealing with the problem lion. It was a big tom, old and scarred, driven to livestock because wild game had become scarce. Ethan took no pleasure in the kill, seeing it as necessary but sad, another wild thing pushed out by the advancing tide of settlement. He collected the bounty from the ranchers and returned to Superior on a cold morning, telling himself he was just passing through on his way to his next job. But his first stop was the hotel, asking after Marlowe Winters. Samuel Chen grinned at him like he knew a secret. "She is doing well, thanks to you. Up and about, seeing patients again like nothing happened. That woman does not know how to slow down. You will probably find her at her father's house." Ethan walked through town, aware of people watching him, nodding greetings. Word had spread about the rescue, and he was something of a local hero now, though he found the attention uncomfortable. He had just done what needed doing. He found Marlowe in her father's kitchen, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, preparing medicines. She looked up when he knocked, and her face lit up in a way that made his chest feel tight. "Ethan, you came back. Come in, please. Did you find your lion?" "I did. All settled." He stepped inside, pulling off his hat. "How are you feeling?" "Much better. Look, I can walk without getting dizzy." She demonstrated, moving around the kitchen with easy grace. "No lasting effects from the cold, no pneumonia, no frostbite. You saved me completely, it seems." "You are strong," he said. "You did most of the saving yourself, surviving long enough to be found." "I survived because I heard you digging," Marlowe said seriously. "I was about to give up, to let go, but I heard the sound of someone moving snow and I held on for just a little longer." "You gave me hope, Ethan. That is what saved me." They looked at each other across the kitchen, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. Ethan knew he should leave, should head out of town and not look back. He was not a settling down kind of man. He had spent the last 8 years moving from place to place, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. He had no home, no property, no plans beyond the next job. What could he offer a woman like Marlowe Winters, who had roots and purpose and a community that needed her? But when she smiled at him, none of that seemed to matter. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "I just made a pot, and I should properly thank you for what you did. I have not really had the chance with everything that happened." "You do not need to thank me," he said, but he sat down at the kitchen table when she gestured to a chair. Marlowe poured coffee for both of them and sat across from him. "Tell me about yourself, Ethan Quade. All I know is that you are a tracker who saves people from avalanches." "What else should I know?" So he told her, surprising himself with how much he shared. He talked about growing up in Texas, about losing his mother young and his sister when he was barely a man, about his father drinking himself to death a year later, leaving Ethan alone in the world. He talked about drifting west, learning skills from anyone who would teach him. Apache scouts and Mexican vaqueros and old mountain men. He talked about the jobs he had taken, some legal and some less so, and how he had eventually settled into tracking and hunting as a way to make a living without getting too entangled with other people. Marlowe listened without interruption, her amber eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she refilled their coffee cups and began her own story. She had grown up in Denver, the only child of a physician and his wife. Her mother had died when Marlowe was 13, and she had begun helping her father in his practice, learning medicine at his side. She had a gift for it, he told her, a natural understanding of the body and healing. When her uncle offered to formally train her, she had spent 2 years learning everything he could teach. Then her father had gotten the wandering bug and decided to head to the Arizona Territory, to the new mining towns where doctors were scarce and needed. Marlowe had come with him, and they had settled in Superior 3 years ago. She had made a life here, earning the trust of the community through hard work and genuine care for her patients. She loved the frontier, loved the challenge of making do with limited resources, loved feeling like her skills made a real difference. "But it is lonely sometimes," she admitted. "There are not many women in mining towns, and the ones who are here are usually married or working in the saloons. I have friendly acquaintances, but no real friends. No one who understands what it is like to be a woman trying to do work that men think she should not be doing." "They are fools if they do not see how good you are at it," Ethan said. "I watched you with your father. You know exactly what you are doing." "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." They talked through the morning and into the afternoon, the conversation flowing easily, touching on everything from books they had read to places they wanted to see to their thoughts on the changing West. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in years, found himself drawn to Marlowe's quick mind and dry humor, to the way she challenged his assumptions and made him think about things differently. When he finally left as evening approached, promising to come by again tomorrow, he realized he had not thought once about leaving town. For the first time in 8 years, he was thinking about staying. Over the next month, Ethan became a regular fixture in Superior. He took odd jobs around town, helping to repair buildings damaged by the heavy snow, breaking horses for the ranchers, even helping Samuel Chen renovate part of his hotel. And every evening, he found his way to Marlowe's house, where they would share dinner and conversation, getting to know each other in the slow, thorough way of people who were building something real. Marlowe found herself looking forward to those evenings with an intensity that surprised her. She had never been particularly interested in romance, too focused on her work and her studies to pay attention to the young men who occasionally tried to court her. But Ethan was different. He did not treat her like she needed protecting or managing. He respected her skills and her independence. He listened when she talked about her medical cases, asking intelligent questions, offering insights from his own experiences. He made her laugh. He made her think. And when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. She knew she was falling in love with him. The realization came one evening as they sat on her father's porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, and Ethan told a story about tracking a lost child through a canyon. The relief on the parents' faces when he brought the girl home safe. Marlowe watched his face as he talked, saw the genuine care in his eyes, the quiet pride in having made a difference, and she thought, "This is the man I want to spend my life with." The thought should have terrified her. She had always assumed she would stay unmarried, that her work would be enough. But now she wanted more. She wanted Ethan's voice in her kitchen every evening. She wanted to hear about his day and tell him about hers. She wanted to wake up next to him, to build a life with him, to face whatever the frontier threw at them side by side. But did he feel the same way? He had never said anything to indicate his feelings went beyond friendship, beyond gratitude for good company. He had never tried to kiss her or even hold her hand, always maintaining a respectful distance. Maybe she was reading too much into the way he looked at her, the way he found excuses to stay just a little longer each evening, the way he had made a place for himself in Superior, when he had been ready to drift on. Ethan was having similar thoughts. He had never felt this way about a woman before, had never wanted to stay in one place for anyone. But Marlowe made him want things he had long ago decided were not for him. A home, stability, partnership, love. He loved her. He realized one morning as he worked on repairing a fence, loved her fierce independence and quick mind, loved the way she cared for her patients and her father, loved how she had looked at him with trust when he dug her out of the snow. He loved Marlowe Winters, and the knowledge was both exhilarating and terrifying. What if she did not feel the same way? What if she saw him as just a friend, just the man who had happened to save her life? He had nothing to offer her really, no property or prospects beyond his skills. She was educated, respected, needed in this community. He was a drifter, a hired gun who could track and hunt but had no real roots anywhere. Why would she want him? The confrontation came on a warm evening in late March, 2 months after the avalanche. They were sitting on the porch as usual, and Marlowe had been quieter than normal, wrapped up in her own thoughts. Finally, she turned to him. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you still in Superior?" She looked at him directly, her amber eyes serious. You said you never stay anywhere long, but you have been here 2 months now. Why? He could give her a dozen practical reasons, talk about the jobs he had found, the work that needed doing. But he was tired of hiding behind practicalities. If he was going to take a risk, now was the time. I am staying because of you, he said quietly. Because I wake up every morning thinking about seeing you that evening. Because talking with you is the best part of my day. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, I fell in love with you, Marlowe, and the thought of leaving makes me feel like I cannot breathe. Marlowe's eyes went wide, and for a terrible moment, Ethan thought he had made a mistake, said too much too soon. Then her face broke into the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. Thank God, she whispered. I thought it was just me. I thought I was imagining that you might feel the same way. You were not imagining it, he said, his heart pounding. I love you, Marlowe. I think I started loving you the moment I pulled you out of that snow and you opened your eyes and looked at me. I just did not know it yet. I love you too, she said, and the words were like sunrise after a long night. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, how to ask if you might consider staying, but I was afraid. Afraid you would say no. Afraid I was just convenient, just a pleasant way to pass time in a town you were stuck in. Ethan moved closer, taking her hands in his. You are not convenient. You are everything. You are the reason I want to stop drifting. You make me want to build something permanent, something real. I do not have much to offer you, Marlowe. No land, no money, just my skills and my word. But if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I do not need land or money, Marlowe said, tears shining in her eyes. I need a partner, someone who understands this life I have chosen, who will not ask me to be less than I am. I think you could be that person, Ethan. I think we could be good together. I think we could be great together, he said, and then he was kissing her finally after weeks of wanting to. She kissed him back with an intensity that matched his own, her hands coming up to frame his face, holding him close like she was afraid he might disappear. When they broke apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 months, but I am sure about this. I am sure about you. Marry me, Marlowe. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. I am sure too. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Superior, with half the town in attendance. Thomas Winters, fully recovered from his pneumonia, walked his daughter down the aisle with tears of joy in his eyes. He had grown fond of Ethan over the past months, approving of the young man's character and his obvious devotion to Marlowe. Samuel Chen and his wife hosted a reception at the hotel, and the townspeople celebrated with music and dancing and stories. More than one person reminded Ethan that he had saved the town's only healer, and now he was taking her for himself, teasing him good-naturedly. Ethan took the ribbing with grace, too happy to be bothered by anything. As the sun set and the party continued, Ethan and Marlowe slipped away to the small house he had bought on the edge of town, using his savings from months of work. It was modest, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs, their home, their new beginning. Are you happy? Ethan asked as they stood on the porch, looking out at the mountains where they had first come together, where he had dug her out of the snow and carried her to safety. I am happier than I ever thought possible, Marlowe said, leaning into his embrace. 2 months ago I was buried in snow thinking I was going to die. Now I am married to the man I love with a whole future ahead of us. It feels like a miracle. You are the miracle, Ethan said, kissing her hair. You survived that avalanche through sheer determination. I just helped a little. You did more than help a little, she said, turning to face him. You gave me a second chance at life, and then you gave me a reason to make the most of that second chance. I love you, Ethan Quade. I am going to love you for the rest of my life." "And I am going to love you for the rest of mine," he replied. "Starting right now." They went inside together, closing the door on the world outside, focused only on each other and the life they were beginning to build together. The next years were good ones. Ethan continued taking tracking jobs and helping local ranchers, building a reputation as a reliable man who could handle difficult situations. Marlowe continued her medical practice, becoming even more valued as she gained experience and refined her skills. Together, they became a fixture in Superior, known for their competence and their devotion to each other. In the fall of 1886, Marlowe discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Bringing a child into the rough frontier world was always a risk, but they were as prepared as anyone could be. Marlowe knew medicine better than most actual doctors, and Ethan would do anything to keep his family safe. Their son was born on a warm May evening in 1887, perfect and healthy, with his mother's amber eyes and his father's determination. They named him James, after Ethan's father, wanting to honor the memory of the man even though his end had been sad. Little James was the light of their lives, and Ethan discovered that fatherhood suited him far more than he had ever imagined. As James grew from infant to toddler, Marlowe and Ethan talked about having more children. Their house was small but could be expanded. The town was growing too, becoming more established, safer. In 1889, Marlowe gave birth to their daughter, Grace, a spirited baby who seemed determined to keep her parents on their toes from day one. Thomas Winters, now a grandfather, delighted in his grandchildren. He had mostly retired from active work, though he still consulted on difficult cases with Marlowe. He watched Ethan teach James to ride, to track, to raid the wilderness, and he told Marlowe often how proud he was of the life she had built, the family she had created. The years passed in the rhythm of frontier life, seasons of plenty and seasons of hardship, moments of danger and long stretches of peace. Ethan and Marlowe faced it all together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. They added rooms to their house as their family grew. They became the people others turned to in times of trouble. They built a legacy in Superior, Arizona, that would last long after they were gone. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1895, Ethan took Marlowe back up to the mountains where he had found her. The avalanche scar had long since been covered by new growth, but they both remembered exactly where it had been. They stood together, looking out over the valley below, their children playing nearby under the watchful eye of a trusted friend. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not been on that mountain that day?" Ethan asked. "I try not to," Marlowe admitted. "But sometimes I do. I think about how close I came to dying, how many things had to go exactly right for me to survive. You had to be tracking that lion. You had to see the avalanche. You had to decide to come down and look. You had to dig in exactly the right place. Any one of those things goes differently, and I am not here." "But you are here," Ethan said, pulling her close. "And I am here. And we have 2 beautiful children and a life that I would not trade for anything. Whatever combination of luck and fate brought us together, I am grateful for it every single day." "So am I," Marlowe said. "You saved my life that day, Ethan. But more than that, you gave me a life worth saving. You gave me love and partnership and family. You gave me everything I did not know I needed." "We gave each other that," Ethan corrected gently. "You saved me too, Marlowe. You gave me a home. You gave me roots. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building. We saved each other." She smiled and kissed him, tasting love and truth in his words. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, and they would keep saving each other through whatever came next for all the years they had left to share. As they rode back down the mountain that evening, their children chattering excitedly about everything they had seen, Marlowe thought about the woman she had been 10 years ago, riding up that same mountain path with medicine in her saddlebags, and no idea that her whole life was about to change. That woman had been alone, capable but solitary, certain that her work would be enough to fill her days. She had been wrong, Marlowe knew now. Work was important, purpose mattered, but love mattered more. The right partnership, the right person standing beside you, made everything else better and brighter and more meaningful. She had found that partnership in the most unlikely way, pulled from snow by a cowboy who had chosen to care, to try, to dig until he found her. Some people never found that kind of love. Some people went their whole lives searching and came up empty. Marlowe had found it by nearly dying, by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, by being buried in snow and ice and hopelessness. And from that darkness had come everything good in her life, everything that mattered, everything that made her grateful to be alive. The town of Superior spread out below them as they descended, lights beginning to glow in windows as families settled in for the evening. Somewhere down there was their house, their home, waiting for their return. Tomorrow Marlowe would see patients and Ethan would work with horses and life would continue in its steady rhythm. But tonight they would tuck their children into bed, and then they would sit on their porch as they did most evenings, talking and laughing and being together. It was a good life, Marlowe thought. Better than good. It was everything she had never known to ask for, delivered in the most unexpected way by a man who saw an avalanche and chose to care, who dug through snow with his bare hands until he found her, who carried her down a mountain and refused to let her die. The cowboy who saved her had become the man she loved, the father of her children, the partner who stood beside her through every season. And that avalanche, that terrible moment when she thought her life was ending, had instead been the beginning of everything that made life worth living. As they reached their house and dismounted, as their children ran ahead shouting with excitement about their day, Marlowe turned to Ethan and took his hand. He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, now familiar and beloved, and smiled the smile he saved just for her. "Welcome home," he said, and she thought there were no sweeter words in any language. She was home, not just in this house or this town, but with this man who had chosen to dig until he found her, who had carried her out of darkness into light. "Welcome home," she echoed, and together they walked inside, closing the door on the cooling evening, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought, knowing that as long as they faced it together, they could handle anything that came their way. The years that followed continued to bless them with happiness. By 1900, James was 13 and already showing signs of becoming a tracker like his father, with an uncanny ability to read sign and understand the wilderness. Grace, at 11, had inherited her mother's gift for healing, often helping Marlowe with patients, learning anatomy and treatment with the same intensity Marlowe had shown at that age. They added a third child in 1892, another son they named Daniel, who had his father's quiet strength and his mother's analytical mind. The three children grew up in a house filled with love and laughter, learning from parents who believed in competence and kindness in equal measure. Thomas Winters lived to see his grandchildren grown, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1902 at the age of 76. His funeral was attended by nearly everyone in Superior, testament to the impact he and his daughter had made on the community. Marlowe grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing her father had lived to see her happy, to see his grandchildren thriving, to know that his legacy of healing would continue through her and through Grace. Ethan held her through the grief, as steady as the mountains themselves, never trying to rush her healing but simply being present, being there, being the partner he had promised to be that day on the porch so many years ago. As the new century dawned, Arizona Territory moved steadily toward statehood, and Superior continued to grow and change. The copper mines expanded, bringing more people, more commerce, more civilization. The wild frontier was slowly being tamed, though the land itself remained rugged and unforgiving. Ethan and Marlowe grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines appearing on their faces, but their love never diminishing. They still sat on their porch most evenings, still talked about everything and nothing, still found joy in each other's company. The passion of their youth had mellowed into something deeper and more enduring, a partnership tested by time and proven true. Their children grew up and made their own choices. James became a ranger, protecting the wild places his father had taught him to love. Grace attended medical school back east, returning to Superior as Dr. Grace Quade, taking over her mother's practice when Marlowe finally decided to retire. Daniel became a teacher, believing that education was the key to building a better future for the territory. Ethan and Marlowe became grandparents themselves, delighting in the next generation as Thomas had delighted in theirs. They watched their children build lives and families, watched the town they called home continue to evolve, watched the world change around them while the constants remained: love and family, and the mountains that had brought them together. On a spring morning in 1912, when Arizona had finally achieved statehood and they were both in their 50s, Marlowe and Ethan rode back up to the mountain pass one last time. They were too old for such adventures. Their children scolded, but they went anyway, wanting to see it again, the place where everything had changed. The path was different now, improved and widened, safer. The spot where the avalanche had been was grown over completely, no sign remaining of the event that had shaped both their lives. They stood together, looking out at the view, and Marlowe leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute reliability that had defined their decades together. "I would do it all again," she said quietly. "Every moment, every hardship, every challenge. I would do it all again just to end up here with you." "Even the avalanche?" Ethan asked, his arm around her waist. "Even the avalanche," she confirmed, "because it brought me you, and you were worth everything." Ethan kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the weight of all their years together settling around them like a comfortable blanket. "I love you, Marlowe Quade. I have loved you since the moment I saw you buried in that snow, fighting so hard to stay alive. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," she said. "My cowboy who dug through the snow until he found me, my partner who stood beside me through everything, my love for all of time." They stayed on the mountain until the sun began to set, then rode down together as they had done so many times before, heading home to the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love that had sustained them through decades. Years later, when they were both old and gray but still together, still holding hands on the porch each evening, their grandchildren would ask about how they met. And Marlowe and Ethan would tell them the story of the avalanche, of the cowboy who chose to dig, of the woman who refused to give up, of the love that grew from that desperate moment in the snow. They would tell them that sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best, that sometimes you have to be buried to be found, that sometimes salvation comes in the form of a stranger who refuses to let you die alone on a mountain. They would tell them that love is worth fighting for, worth digging for, worth every ounce of effort it takes to find and keep. And when the grandchildren ran off to play and the evening settled around them, Marlowe and Ethan would sit in companionable silence. Two old souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful that would outlast them both. They had saved each other in every way that mattered, and that salvation had bloomed into a love story that would be told in Superior for generations to come. The story of the healer and the cowboy, the avalanche and the rescue, the death that became life, the darkness that became light. They lived out their days in that house on the edge of town, surrounded by children and grandchildren, respected and loved by their community, never taking for granted the gift they had been given. And when they died, years apart but never truly separated, they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the mountains where they had found each other. Their headstones simple but clear. Marlowe Winters Quade and Ethan Quade, beloved partners, together always. Their children placed fresh flowers on the graves every spring and told their own children the story, keeping the legend alive. The story of how love can come from the most unexpected places, how one moment of choice, one decision to care, to try, to dig until you find what you are looking for, can change everything. How a cowboy on a mountain tracking a lion saw an avalanche and chose to look for survivors. How he dug through snow for hours until his hands bled. How he found a woman more dead than alive and refused to let her go. How he carried her down to safety, and in doing so carried them both into a future neither had imagined but both had needed. It was the kind of love story the West was made of, epic and simple all at once, built on courage and choice and the refusal to give up even when all hope seemed lost. And it all began with snow and cold and darkness, with a woman buried alive, and a man who would not stop digging until he found her, who would not stop fighting until she was safe, who would not stop loving her for all the rest of their days.